We often think the last months of a war are the easiest. The enemy is breaking, the momentum is yours, the maps on the wall all point in one direction. But sometimes, at the very moment victory is within reach, the real danger comes from behind your own lines, from pride, from politics, from allies who suddenly stop acting like allies. It's early January 1945 at Supreme Headquarters, Allied Expeditionary for somewhere in liberated France. Outside, snow lies on muddy roads. The German Ardennes offensive has been blunted. The front is stabilizing again. On paper, the worst seems past. Inside, Dwight Eisenhower sits at his desk with a draft order in front of him that could blow the alliance apart. He has already written the words that would relieve Field Marshal Bernard Law Montgomery of his command. He knows that if he signs them, British prestige shatters. If he doesn't act at all, American trust in their British partners may not survive. He cannot fire Montgomery without endangering the coalition. He cannot give Montgomery what he wants without risking mass resignation among his own best generals. There is no route here that does not cost him something vital. He needs a path that satisfies no one but keeps everyone in the war. And he has to walk it alone. 2 weeks earlier, the crisis begins not with gunfire, but with words. 7 January 1945. Bernard Montgomery stands before a room full of reporters. The Battle of the Bulge, German Ardennes offensive, is still fresh in everyone's mind. American units have taken huge casualties. Bastogne has only just been relieved. Montgomery, in his careful, measured tone, explains to the press how the battle unfolded. He describes finding American forces in disarray on the northern shoulder. He outlines how he, as the commander in that sector, reorganized the defense and stopped the Germans. To him, this is a story of British steadiness. To many who hear it, it sounds like something else. He makes it seem as though American generals panicked and British leadership had to rescue them. The reaction in the United States is volcanic. Newspapers run headlines suggesting Montgomery has stolen credit for American victories. Veterans organizations demand explanations, but the most dangerous anger is not in the press, it's in the American High Command. General Omar Bradley, commander of the U.S. 12th Army Group, man who has overseen the largest American force in Europreds, the transcripts. To him, Montgomery's words are not just offensive, they are intolerable. He tells Eisenhower bluntly that he will not continue under a command structure that allows such insults. If Montgomery's narrative stands, if British commanders can publicly diminish American performance while using American troops, Bradley will resign. He will not be an Army Group commander on paper only, while someone else takes credit for what his soldiers do. For the men who have fought and bled in the Ardennes, Montgomery's press conference cuts even deeper. To the GIS who survived that forest, ones who froze in foxholes, who watched friends die in the snow, the suggestion that British command saved them feels like a second attack. 19,000 Americans did not leave those woods. To imply that their leaders were flailing, that their sacrifice needed British rescue, is not just incorrect in their eyes. It is a betrayal. Montgomery's own chief of staff flies to Eisenhower's headquarters and learns how close the edge really is. He is told plainly, Eisenhower has already drafted the orders to relieve Montgomery. The field marshal is hours away from being fired. He returns to Montgomery and does something few subordinates would dare. He forces his commander to write an apology. On 8 January, Montgomery issues that apology, not because he believes he is wrong, but because he now understands his career is hanging by a thread. The apology cools the immediate fury just enough. It keeps Eisenhower from signing the relief order sitting on his desk. But it does nothing to restore trust with American commanders. The damage is still there under the surface. And in 2 days, Montgomery is about to make it worse. To understand what he is about to demand, you have to go back a few weeks. December 1944, the Germans launched the Ardennes offensive at the Battle of the Bulge. The surprise attack punches a deep, jagged wedge into the American front line. In the chaos, the U.S. First Army, under General Courtney Hodges, is cut off from its normal headquarters. Command relationships on the northern part of the front become tangled. Eisenhower makes a practical decision. Temporarily, he puts two American armies, the First Army and the U.S. Ninth Army under General William Simpson, under Montgomery's 21st Army Group. It is an emergency measure. Montgomery's headquarters is physically closer to the northern sector. He can coordinate defense on that shoulder more effectively until the crisis passes. In total, more than 500 American soldiers come under his control. Everyone involved understands this as a temporary arrangement. At least that is what Eisenhower believes. Montgomery sees something else. In his own mind, the Battle of the Bulge proves a deeper point. When American forces get into serious trouble, they need British command to stabilize things. His clumsy press conference is one way of expressing that belief. Behind the misjudged words, the underlying message remains: British leadership saved the situation. Now, in the aftermath, Montgomery looks at the temporary command arrangement like a door he can wedge open. He wants those two American armies not just for a crisis, he wants them for the final act. By early January, he has a vision. A great northern thrust into Germany. British and Canadian forces alone are too exhausted to do it. 5 years of war have drained their manpower. He needs American strength. He sees the Ninth Army in particular, some 300 Americans, as his security blanket. A force he believes he needs because his own divisions are worn down. From Simpson's perspective, from the view of Ninth Army's officers and men, it feels different. It feels less like partnership and more like being held in reserve for someone else's strategy. Held in place under a commander who does not fully trust American methods, but absolutely needs American power. Within days of the press conference, Montgomery meets Eisenhower at Supreme Headquarters. He arrives with a clear, formal proposal. Keep the First Army and the Ninth Army under his command, launch a concentrated offensive in the north, drive into the Ruhr industrial region, Germany's economic heart, end the war by May with one decisive blow. He argues on military grounds. This broad front strategy, he says, is wasteful. American armies in the South are grinding forward with limited results. Resources are being spread too thin. Everything should be focused on one massive thrust under unified direction. His direction: British forces are exhausted, Canadian divisions are under strength. American manpower is essential for any true breakthrough. If those two armies are taken away, he claims, the northern offensive cannot succeed. Eisenhower listens in silence. He has heard many of these arguments before from Montgomery and from London. When Montgomery finishes, Ike gives his answer. The arrangement was always temporary. The armies will return to American command. Montgomery's expression changes. In his mind, this is not just a disagreement. It is a strategic mistake he believes Eisenhower is making for political reasons. He sees his grand northern plan being strangled. Eisenhower sees something else. He sees the edge of a fissure that could crack the alliance wide open. Bradley has already made his position clear. If Montgomery keeps those armies permanently, Bradley will not accept it. He will not remain an army group commander without armies. He will not stand by while British strategy uses American troops and then claims the victories as its own. He has commanded these formations since Normandy. They are his responsibility and, in a deep sense, his. Temporarily placing them under Montgomery during the Bulge made operational sense. Making that arrangement permanent is politically impossible. Other American commanders, quietly but firmly, support Bradley. Eisenhower does not need to guess what Bradley is telling him between the lines. Keep Montgomery satisfied, keep your American generals loyal. You cannot do both. George Patton hears about Montgomery's demands, and his reaction is immediate. He tells Bradley he will resign alongside him if Montgomery keeps permanent control of American armies. For Patton, the issue is not rank or ego, it is blood. His Third Army turned 90 degrees in a blizzard to relieve Bastogne. His tanks and infantry took the southern jaw of the Bulge, stopping the German offensive from the south. His men did the fighting and the dying. Now, after all that, the idea that their future operations could be directed, and their achievements claim it be a man he considers a cautious egotist is too much. He will not allow American casualties to be currency in someone else's political account. If Eisenhower loses both Bradley and Patton, The structure of the American command in Europe collapses. Other generals will follow. The men who have led U.S. forces across France will refuse to serve under a British strategic direction they no longer trust. The nightmare Winston Churchill has feared since the alliance formed begins to take shape. A mass resignation of American generals, the coalition splitting over command politics at the very moment victory is within sight. The war in Europe, years of sacrifice, everything, jeopardized because one field marshal Canada will not control his ego. Churchill learns of the crisis and immediately grasps the stakes. If Eisenhower strips Montgomery of all American forces, British influence over Allied strategy will effectively end. The final chapters of the European War will be written almost entirely by American hands. He looks for a middle path. He calls Eisenhower and proposes a compromise. Let Montgomery keep the Ninth Army. Return the First Army to Bradley. Montgomery will still have enough American strength for the Rhine crossing. Bradley will have his main army group largely restored. British strategic relevance is preserved, at least within the northern sector, and perhaps the American command does not tear itself apart. Eisenhower accepts Churchill's compromise. He needs something he can stand on. Bradley will regain the First Army. Montgomery will keep just one American army, not two, and only for what comes next, but Churchill's proposal is just a framework. Ike adds the critical restriction himself. He decides he will deliver the details in person. This cannot be done by memo. It has to be said face to face. A few days later, Montgomery stands in Eisenhower's office. His chief of staff knows how close his commander has come to losing everything. Eisenhower keeps his voice level. First Army, he says, will return to Bradley's command immediately. The Ninth Army will remain under Montgomery, but only for the Rhine crossing operation. After that, it will go back to American control. This is not negotiable. Montgomery asks the obvious question, when exactly will the army return after the crossing? Eisenhower answers carefully, that will depend on operational circumstances, he says, but it will return. Montgomery protests. Long-term planning requires a clear view of one's force structure. He needs to know what units he will command for follow on operations beyond the Rhine. Eisenhower repeats himself. The decision is final. The choice in front of Montgomery is brutally simple. Accept a humiliating reduction in American army temporarily for one operation, or risk losing both American armies immediately and command only British and Canadian troops for the rest of the war. Montgomery is ambitious, but he is not blind. He accepts 17 January 1945, the U.S. First Army officially returns to Bradley's 12th Army Group. Hodges now reports to Bradley again, not to Montgomery. The command structure that existed before the Bulge is restored. Bradley is satisfied with this part of the deal. He has his largest army back. Montgomery's authority over American forces is cut down to one army for one specified mission. The precedent is reasserted. American armies will, in the end, be commanded by Americans, but Bradley is not fully at ease. He does not like Montgomery keeping the Ninth Army even for a short period. He knows the field marshal's habits. He predicts quietly that Montgomery will use the Rhine crossing to argue for extended command, to find reasons to delay the army's return. He tells Eisenhower to watch him closely. Eisenhower listens and then says what a supreme commander must say once a decision has been taken. The decision is made. Montgomery needs Ninth Army for the Rhine crossing. After that, the army will come back. Period. February and March 1945, Montgomery's headquarters plans Operation Plunder, assault across the Rhine in the north. It will be the largest river crossing of the war. Bridges must be thrown across a wide, heavily defended water barrier under fire. Artillery schedules must be precise. Airborne drops must be synchronized. Simpson's Ninth Army works closely with Montgomery's staff. On the American side, many officers respect Montgomery's strengths, his methodical, detailed planning, his insistence that nothing be left to chance in a set-piece operation. The planning conferences are meticulous. Traffic plans, supply dumps, artillery barrage, every piece is laid out, checked and checked again. But Ninth Army officers notice something that troubles them. In British staff discussions about operations beyond the Rhine, Ninth Army is always there. Maps of future thrusts into northern Germany include Ninth Army formations as integral parts of 21st Army Group. No one speaks of the Army returning to American command after the crossing. Bradley's name does not appear in the chains of command on those diagrams. The plans treat Ninth Army as if it is permanently part of Montgomery's group. The compromise, on paper at least, seems to be quietly fading. When Simpson's staff raise concerns indirectly, the answer they get from above is simple. Eisenhower will handle it after the Rhine is crossed. For now, focus on the operation. Get across. 22 March 1945. Far to the south, Patton's Third Army reaches the Rhine near Oppenheim. Patton sees an opening, a stretch of river not as heavily defended as expected. He does not wait for a grand set piece. No massive preliminary bombardment, no elaborate theatrical build-up. Within hours, elements of Third Army are across, using assault boats and quickly thrown bridges. As soon as they secure a foothold, Patton calls Bradley. "Tell the world we're across," he says. "I want the world to know Third Army made it before Monty starts his engines." It is more than a tactical success. It is an unmistakable demonstration of American mobile warfare doctrine in its purest form. See a weakness, exploit it immediately. Do not wait for perfect alignment. Move. When Montgomery hears about Patton's crossing, he is furious. To him, this is recklessness. The Rhine, in his view, is not a river to be taken on a hasty impulse. It requires massive preparation, careful engineering, a coordinated, thoroughly planned assault. Patton has, in his eyes, simply been lucky. The real crossing, he insists, will be Operation Plunder, the one done with professional, detailed planning. But whether Montgomery likes it or not, Patton has proven something that cannot be ignored. The Rhine can be crossed without Montgomery's elaborate preparations. American methods work. The warrior has beaten the politician by one day. 23 March 1945. Operation Plunder begins. Over 300 Allied troops take part. From the north, British and Canadian forces move to the river's edge. From the south in that sector, Ninth Army lines up. Massed artillery opens fire, pounding German positions on the far bank. 2 airborne divisions drop behind enemy lines, seizing key road junctions, bridges, and high ground. Engineers, working under fire, begin constructing bridges. The river itself becomes a battlefield. The operation succeeds. Montgomery's forces cross the Rhine and carve out a substantial bridgehead. German resistance is heavy but fragmented. Allied strength troops, tanks, guns, air power is simply too much. By 25 March, elements of Ninth Army and British units are pushing beyond the river into the heart of Germany. Montgomery declares the operation a complete success, perfect execution of a set-piece battle. The northern route into Germany is open. British and Commonwealth flags fly over the assault crossings. They have led a massive, textbook river assault that demonstrates, in Montgomery's mind, that careful planning can overcome any obstacle. In the American press, the story plays out differently. Newspapers note that Patton crossed first, with fewer casualties and less preparation. Operation Plunder is impressive, but it comes after Patton has already shown that the Rhine can be taken rapidly. Simpson's Ninth Army performs superbly. American troops do a huge share of the heavy fighting in Plunder. Montgomery praises their performance openly. He tells his staff that Ninth Army is essential for what comes next. Operations beyond the Rhine, operations deep into northern Germany. After the river is crossed, Montgomery's headquarters submits new operational plans for the advance. On those maps, Ninth Army is still under his command. He argues to Eisenhower that removing Ninth Army now would disrupt ongoing operations. The Rhine-encirclement planned trapping of the industrial heart of Germany's army. This requires unity of command, he says. Ninth Army, positioned on the southern side of the pocket, is crucial to closing it. To transfer the army back to American command in the middle of this complex maneuver would, in his argument, be militarily foolish. On the American side, the irony is hard to ignore. Back in September, Patton's Third Army had been starved of fuel to support Montgomery's gamble during Operation Market, Gardena bold, airborne, led thrusts that ended in disaster. Montgomery had called that failure 90 successful and suffered no real consequences. Now, months later, he is again arguing for resources and authority. It is time to keep an American army under his flag-using operational necessity as justification. For some watching from Ike's headquarters, it looks less like coalition strategy and more like personal ambition. The alliance, at least in Montgomery's hands, seems at risk of becoming a tool for individual glory. Eisenhower sees exactly what Patton predicted. Montgomery is using the success of Operation Plunder as a lever to extend his command of Ninth Army indefinitely. Each new operation is framed as a reason to keep the army under British control. Never quite the right moment to let go. Always a new encirclement, a new objective, a new excuse. Bradley goes to Eisenhower and says what Ike has already begun to feel. The time has come. Montgomery has had his Rhine crossing. It has succeeded. Now the army must be returned as promised. Eisenhower agrees. He has given Montgomery the benefit of the doubt one last time. Now, with the operation complete and patterns clear, he has the justification he needs to close this chapter. 4 April 4. In the operations room at Kiev, the war in Europe is in its final savage sprint. American columns pour east. German defenses crack and then crumble. On Eisenhower's desk, a single sheet of paper waits for his signature. It is the order that will decide, once and for all, who commands the last great American push into Germany. He signs the use. Ninth Army is returning to American hands. The order goes out. On the charts, colored pins shift. Ninth Army's symbol moves from under the British 21st Army Group back into the boundary lines of Bradley's 12th Army Group. The transfer is official. From this day forward, Simpson reports to Bradley, not to Montgomery. Montgomery, who just weeks ago commanded 2 American armies, now commands none. From here to the end of the war, his forces will be British and Canadian only. The protest from Montgomery is immediate and sharp. He sends his arguments up the chain. Ninth Army, he insists, has been essential to every major operation since the Rhine crossing. To pull it away now while operations to encircle the route are still unfolding makes no military sense. The advance into northern Germany, he says, will be damaged. Unity of command will be broken. He makes his case not just to Eisenhower, but to the one man in London whose voice might carry enough weight to undo this, Winston Churchill. And here is where the war's political gravity finally asserts itself. 3 months earlier, in mid-January, Churchill had already stood in the House of Commons and swallowed a bitter pill. On 18 January 1945, under the shadow of Montgomery's disastrous press conference and the fury it ignited among the Americans, Churchill faces his own parliament and admits what everyone inside Allied headquarters already knows. He declares publicly that the British Empire is now the junior partner in this war. He says that American troops have done almost all the fighting and have suffered almost all the losses. For a man who took office at Britain's darkest hour, who once spoke of fighting alone if he had to, it is a moment of profound humiliation. But Churchill understands something that pride cannot change. Without the Americans, without their armies, their industry, their willingness to lead this war in the West cannot be finished. So when Montgomery now appeals to him in April, complaining that the loss of Ninth Army will cripple his advance, Churchill hears the argument and lets it die. He does not intervene. The political cost of fighting this particular battle for the sake of one field marshal's command is too high. British influence over Allied grand strategy has been sliding since D-Day. This is the final admission of a new reality. American forces will be commanded by Americans. Under Bradley's direction, Simpson's Ninth Army keeps moving. They drive into the heart of Germany, now aligned with American operational priorities instead of British ones. In late April, their advance brings them to the Elbe River. There, American patrols from Ninth Army link up with Soviet forces pushing in from the east. Hands are shaken on rubble-strewn banks. The army Montgomery fought so hard to keep under his banner plays its part in the final victory, not as a British, controlled formation, but as an American army under American command. North of them, Montgomery's 21st Army Group advances into northern Germany and the Netherlands. British and Canadian units liberate Dutch towns where people have been starving under occupation. They take German ports, cutting off escape and resupply routes. On May 4, German forces in Montgomery's sector surrender to him. He has done his duty as a Commonwealth commander and done it well, but he has done it with only British and Canadian troops. The grand vision he once had of leading a massive multinational thrust straight to Berlin at the head of a combined Allied force never materializes. That dream dies not in a German ambush, but in conference rooms and press halls months earlier. The Rhine crossing with 9th Army, Operation Plunder, is his last operation commanding American soldiers. Looking back over those last months, Eisenhower's compromise with Montgomery is more than a neat political patch. It is a test, a strategic gauntlet. By letting Montgomery keep one American army temporarily, Ike gives him one final chance to show that British leadership with American strength can match or exceed what American commanders are already doing on their own. Even with 9th Army in his hand, Montgomery's methodical approach cannot beat American mobile warfare in tempo. Patton crosses the Rhine first, without fanfare, without weeks of build-up. American armies fan out into Germany faster than any British-led plan can manage, even with you. Divisions under Montgomery's flag, the comparison is not just in speed, it is in mindset. 4 months before Plunder, in September 1944, Montgomery launched Operation Market Guard in an ambitious airborne, in-ground thrust designed to jump multiple rivers, race into the German north, and possibly end the war by Christmas. Intelligence warnings about German strength around Arnhem were clear. He overruled them. Paratroopers landed too far from their objectives. Ground columns bogged down. Bridges that had to be taken intact were fought over house by house instead. When it was over, Market Garden was a failure. Montgomery famously called it 90 successful. No one relieved him. When Eisenhower agrees in January 1945 to let Montgomery keep 9th Army for Operation Plunder, he is, in a sense, betting that the field marshal has learned from that disaster, that he will use American strength wisely without overreaching, that he will respect the promises made about command and control. He doesn't. When the Rhine is crossed and Plunder succeeds, Montgomery immediately begins treating 9th Army as a permanent part of his command. Every new plan, every new encirclement becomes another reason to keep the army a little longer. Operational necessity, he argues, demands it. It is exactly the pattern Bradley warned Eisenhower about. That pattern, in the end, gives Ike all the justification he needs. Montgomery has been given his chance. He has had his elaborate operation, his meticulously planned river crossing, his opportunity to show what he can do with an American army under him. Instead, he has tried to convert a temporary trust into permanent control. On 4 April, Eisenhower closes the door. The American armies that will finish the war in the West will do so under American command, using American operational methods. The British contribution remains immense and honorable, but the era in which London could steer the grand design is over. The lesson that emerges from this struggle inside the alliance is not about who crossed which river first or who got to Berlin. It is about trust. Coalition warfare cannot function if partners believe their sacrifices will be minimized or misrepresented. When Montgomery stood up on 7 January and told the world he had handled the Battle of the Bulge, implying that American generals and soldiers had flailed until he arrived, did more damage than he realized. He did not just offend a few senior officers, he shattered confidence. To the GIS who froze in the Ardennes and watched friends die in snow-choked fields, his words felt like a dismissal of their dead. To Bradley and Patton they felt like a warning. If we let this man command our armies in victory, he will also command our story. Eisenhower, caught between volcanic American fury and proud British insistence, tries one last time to keep the alliance balanced. He gives Montgomery 9th Army for one operation. He tells Bradley to trust that the army will come back when the job is done. Then he watches. Montgomery does what his critics expect. He uses that last gift not to rebuild trust, but to press his advantage. He tries to keep the army indefinitely. In doing so, He gives Eisenhower proof that the compromise cannot stretch any further. In the end, Montgomery's dream of leading a massive Allied thrust to Berlin does not die in a German ambush or a failed river crossing. It dies in a press room under the glare of reporters' flashbulbs when he chooses his ego over his alliance. From that moment on, every step he takes with American troops under his command is on borrowed time. Eisenhower gives him enough rope to redeem himself or to hang himself. Montgomery uses every inch of it. And when it is over, he is left with honor in his own sector, a river crossing executed to plan, and a legacy permanently shaded by the moment he lost the trust of the men he needed most. If you've followed this story to the end, think about where you believe the real turning point was. Was it Montgomery's press conference that shattered American trust? Eisenhower's compromise that gave him one last chance with Ninth Army? Or Patton's sudden crossing of the Rhine that proved American doctrine no longer needed British approval? Do you think coalition politics or battlefield performance mattered more in deciding who led the final drive into Germany? If you want more stories that look inside alliance arguments, the compromises, and the moments when ego nearly cost victory, tell me which campaign, which commanders, or which crisis you want. Explore next. Like the video if this changed how you see Eisenhower, Montgomery, and the fragile balance of Allied command. Subscribe if you want more deep dives into the battles where politics and strategy collided just as violently as armies on the field.